Today we're going to learn about lunar and solar eclipses. Make sure you have your notes out in front of you and you're ready to go. The first thing we're going to talk about is what actually is an eclipse. If you don't understand what an eclipse is, it's hard to learn about the different kinds of eclipses. So an eclipse is when something passes in front of the sun and it blocks their light. Okay, this can be the Earth passing in front of the sun, blocking the light, or it can be the moon passing in front of it and blocking the light. So either time, when the sun's light is blocked, you have an eclipse. It's important to understand there is more than one type of eclipse. One, there's a lunar. Okay, lunar, remember, that means moon, and solar, that means sun. So lunar eclipse is when the Earth casts a shadow on the moon, causing the moon to go dark. So when the moon's all full and we can see all the light reflecting, but all of a sudden the Earth blocks the sun, then the reflection goes away. That's a lunar eclipse. The solar eclipse is when the moon casts the shadow on the Earth. So that happens during the day. We can see the sun, then all of a sudden the moon passes between the sun and the Earth, and it blocks the sun for a couple minutes, and then we see the sun again. That's a solar eclipse. So always remember the light that's being blocked is the eclipse. So if I can't see the moon's reflection anymore, it's a lunar eclipse. If I can't see the sun shining on me anymore, it's a solar eclipse. Make sure your notes are out. You're getting ready to write all these things down. These are important points that you need to remember. So a lunar eclipse, okay, lunar means moon. That means I could see the moon, and then the Earth passed between the sun and the moon, and so it cast its shadow on the moon, and I can't see the moon's reflected light anymore, just for a little while. So you're going to write down the Earth is between the sun and the moon. The moon kind of goes dark, or it kind of glows red. And this occurs at night. So if I'm seeing the reflection of the sun on the moon, I can only really see that mostly at night on a full moon. And the Earth passes in front of it, casts a shadow, so I could see the moon. Now I can't see it, and then I can see it again. Because remember, we never stop moving. So we're revolving around the sun, and the moon's revolving around us. So all that movement makes it just happen for a little bit. Okay? Umbra means it's in the full shadow, so it blocks the entire moon. Penumbra means it's in the partial shadow, so I can still see part of the moon. Some people call it a partial eclipse or a full eclipse, depending on if it's in the umbra or in the partial or in the penumbra. Okay, so pause and get all that written down. Okay, this is just the types of eclipses. You might want to jot this down if you can't remember it. A total eclipse is when the moon passes completely into the umbra. So if you look at the picture, there's the umbra shadow and there's the penumbra. It's a partial eclipse when it's in the penumbra, so it's not totally blocked. We can still see some of the moon, but not all of it. Or some of it will glow red and the other will not. So we have a partial and a total. Great, some fun facts. A total lunar eclipse is a rare event. It only happens about every 2.5 years. We can see this from any given location. So this is a little different from a solar eclipse where we have to be in a specific spot. Lunar eclipses, if it's happening, we can see it from anywhere. Around 35% of lunar eclipses are total eclipses. When the moon appears red during a total eclipse, it's called a blood moon. In 2025, we will experience a total lunar eclipse on March 14th. The total number of lunar eclipses, the total a lunar eclipse can last is about 105 minutes. Again, we're not speeding through the solar system, we're moving slowly. So a total eclipse can last a little while. Lunar eclipses are safe to watch with the naked eye. Because we're not looking straight at the sun, we're looking at its reflective light, it won't hurt our eyes like a solar eclipse will. So those are some fun facts. So here's some pictures kind of showing the total lunar eclipse that happened in 2007. So you can see it begins, we can see the whole full moon at night. Remember, at night, full moon. The Earth's shadow starts passing in front of it. So it grows smaller and smaller. Then we get that blood red kind of moon. And then we continue passing. And so we start seeing a little more and a little more light until we see the full moon again. So this is what it might look like if you were watching a total eclipse. On the other hand, a partial eclipse, you can see the left side has got a shadow cast on it while the right side is still very bright. This would be a partial eclipse. This would be in the penumbra. And yes, you need to know the words umbra and penumbra. Right, a solar eclipse is kind of the opposite. The moon is going to come between the sun and the earth. So remember, whatever's getting blocked, whatever light we can't see, that's what we call it. So our moon comes between the sun and the earth and it blocks the sunlight. So the sun goes dark. This occurs only during the day, which makes sense. I can't block the sun if it's not daytime. Again, we can have an umbra, a full shadow, or a penumbra, a partial shadow. So we can have a full solar eclipse or a partial solar eclipse. So pause the video so you can get all these notes written down. All right, a couple little things to remember. A total solar eclipse can only occur if you're at the exact spot within the moon's umbra, which isn't very big. So that's the reason you have to be on a certain place on Earth to see a total solar eclipse. You can only see it in certain places at certain times. A partial solar eclipse is visible when you're in the penumbra shadow. So only some of the moon will be shadowed. So we'll see it'll block part of the sun, but not the whole sun. And an annular eclipse occurs when the moon is the farthest from the Earth in its orbit. This makes the moon look smaller. So during the eclipse, you might see like an outer ring around the sun. So a couple different kinds of eclipses that you might see with a solar eclipse. What would a solar eclipse be without some fun facts? Each year, there are between 2 and 5 solar eclipses, but you're not going to be able to see them all. A total solar eclipse, when you only see is a faint solar corona, is called a totality. So think about it. It's totally in the shadow, so totality. Total solar eclipses are rare and happen only once about every 18 months. A total solar eclipse lasts about 7.5 minutes. You can only see the partial eclipse from the north and south poles. The moon is slowly distancing herself from Earth, so eventually there will be no more solar eclipses. About 400 million years. That's a while. I don't think we need to worry about that in our lifetime, at least. So some fun facts. Here's a good visual of what it might look like. So we start out with our bright sun. The moon starts casting its shadow slowly. Finally, we're in what's called apogee, where the sun is completely covered by the moon's shadow. The shadows from the moon casting it. We can see that corona glowing around. Then the moon starts moving out of the way, and slowly the sun is back visible. And again, from the previous slide, you know that can take about 7.5 minutes, somewhere around in there. All right, so this is a partial solar eclipse. Remember, you're in the penumbra. So one of the ways you might be able to remember it is if it's raining, you want to be under the umbrella, the whole thing. You want the whole thing to cover you, right? You don't want to get wet. So a umbrella or an umbra covers you completely so you don't get wet. A penumbra means you're outside of that umbrella, maybe half your shoulders out, so you're getting wet. So that's just one kind of easy way to remember it. An umbra is total. You're totally under there, you're not getting wet. A penumbra, some of you are sticking out. This is a picture of what the annular eclipse might look like. Again, the moon's the farthest from Earth it can be in its orbit, and it happens to be an eclipse at the same time. So while it tries to cast its shadow, it casts as much as it can. But there's a little bit of that sun that you can still see around it because it's not big enough to cover it completely. Got to know the moon is much smaller than the sun, but the distance makes it look different. How often do they happen? Well, it kind of depends. Lunar eclipses happen more often than solar eclipses. Everyone that is experiencing nighttime during a lunar eclipse can see it, which is different from a solar eclipse. You have to be in the exact spot on Earth to see a solar eclipse, but lunars, again, it's different. If it's night, you can see it. The spot on the Earth is so small that the same place only sees a solar eclipse about every 350 years. So if you saw the solar eclipse a while ago here in Georgia, you won't see another one. So we don't see eclipses all the time because the moon's orbit is tilted. So during the month, the moon might be a little bit above us or a little bit below us. Only every now and then does it hit exactly where it's in an exact straight line. And for this reason, it doesn't always block the sun. It has to be in a perfect alignment for it to block the sun. And if it's a little bit tilted, it's not in a perfect alignment, so it can't completely block the sun.